Twitter has announced new rules that will label tweets from politicians and government officials if they break its rules. This is what the label would look like. Users would have to click on it before being able to see the tweet. This policy applies to the likes of President Trump and any government official or world leader who has a verified account with more than 100,000 followers. Donald Trump Jr. responded to the new rule, saying if they can do this to the leader of the free world, imagine what they are doing to you and your voice. And joining me now is Wired editor-in-chief Nick Thompson. He is at the Aspen Ideas Festival in Colorado. Nick, so nice to see you.
Great to see you, too.
Want to go back first to 2007 when Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey defended his approach to not restricting President Trump's tweets if users felt they violated rules. Dorsey said then, quote, "We're not taking something down that people should be able to report on and actually show that this is what the source said." Well, this newest step doesn't take the tweet down, but it does add an additional layer before it is seen to the user. How did Twitter evolve on this issue?
I think that one of the things that Silicon Valley has realized is that you can limit the reach of something without limiting free speech. So they're in this situation where there's content that violates their platform that may make people unsafe, but they don't want to remove it because they don't want to violate their principles of free speech. And so I think Twitter actually, in this case, has come up with a pretty sensible compromise where they leave the content up, but they put a little gray box around it and say, even though this is from a public figure and somebody important, it violates our terms of service or it violates our rules in some way. It's actually a sensible middle ground.
Twitter is doing this at a time when it's facing accusations of being biased against conservatives. First, I want to talk about what President Trump said just this week before Twitter announced its labeling policy. Let's go ahead and listen to this.
How concerned are you that technology companies are censoring conservatives, and they're going to do this right up to the 2020 election?
Well, they're doing it to me on Twitter. I mean, what they did to me on Twitter is incredible. I have millions and millions of followers, but I will tell you, they make it very hard for people to join me in Twitter, and they make it very much harder for me to get out the message. They make it,
really?
It's incredible.
Nick, is there any evidence out there to support what the president claims, and does this move by Twitter only add fuel to his criticism?
So what he's saying is absurd, right? It's very easy to find Trump on Twitter. It's very easy to follow Trump on Twitter. He's used it as his most effective forms of communication. But I understand why he's saying it. I mean, he's working the refs. Both sides do this, right? You argue that the platform isn't serving your needs and is biased against you. And by so doing, you make the platform more likely to give you things. It's just like James Harden before the series with the Warriors, right? I don't get any foul calls. So that's what he's doing. Is it going to work? I don't know. One of the stories of the 2016 election is that the Republicans worked the refs really hard with Facebook, and they got Facebook to get very concerned that they were going to be regulated because of their bias. And because of that, Facebook stuck its head in the sand and avoided a lot of the fake content that was helping Donald Trump. So everybody does it in tech, but that doesn't mean it's got any truth to it.
So many users on Facebook. How challenging is it going to be for Twitter to actually execute this policy in a fair way, given the sheer number of political figures who actually use the platform?
It's going to be pretty hard. I mean, you're going to have to come up with a combination of systems that allow you to respond very quickly when somebody finds a tweet that violates policies. You're going to have to come up with AI filters that give you hints on that, and you're going to have a bunch of very smart people who make very hard calls. With Donald Trump, it will be pretty easy, right? Because everybody reads his tweets immediately, contradicting what he said. With other politicians, where it takes a little while to circulate and people aren't quite as in tune with the issues and the potential violations, it will be harder. I can assure you that Twitter will be very, very happy. The same day that Trump violates their terms of service, some prominent Democrat does it too. That would be their dream scenario.
Before we go, as I mentioned at the start, you're at the Aspen Ideas Festival, where you're going to be moderating a conversation about national election security, an important topic. You're going to be speaking with former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson and Facebook's Public Policy Director for Global Elections. So what do you hope to learn from this conversation?
Oh, I'm very excited for this. I've been doing a whole series of great conversations out here. In this one in particular, there's this really interesting tension where the federal government says, hey, private companies don't give us enough data. It's hard to track back the people manipulating our elections. And the private companies say, hey, the federal government doesn't tell us what they found from their intelligence operations. How are we supposed to figure out who's manipulating our elections? And so both sides in the past cast a little blame on the other. So it's kind of great that I'm going to have this public forum, not to give away if they're both watching, but I want to figure out how we're going to solve this dynamic, because it's in everybody's interest for the private companies to work well with the federal government.
Well, we look forward to checking back in with you and seeing how that all comes out. Nick Thompson, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.